It's no longer being framed as a normal Australia visit. At this point, a lot of people are calling it something else entirely. A selling trip. And yes, selling feels like the word many critics are choosing, because emerging almost sounds too mild for what they believe happened. The strongest reaction has centered on Archie and Lilibet, with commentators arguing that the children, referred to in public materials as Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, are now being pulled directly into commercial promotion. That, for many observers, is where the real outrage begins. They believe the Sussexes are openly pushing products linked to the children's names and identities, and, in doing so, crossing a line Queen Elizabeth II would never have approved of. To critics, it feels distasteful, even if not surprising, given everything that has already happened over the past few years. And they also argue it may not work the way it was intended to, because fresh polling suggests the backlash isn't limited to royal watchers abroad. Many Australians themselves appear deeply unimpressed by what they saw during the trip. When Meghan posted after returning home, that only added to the discussion. One detail in particular drew attention: a card seemingly addressed to Princess Lilibet Diana. For people already suspicious of the broader strategy, that was enough to reinforce the idea that the children are becoming part of a larger business image. What once looked like a routine public appearance is now being recast by critics as something much more calculated, with branding, publicity, and promotion sitting at the center of it all. The focus quickly shifted to the products themselves. Attention landed on items tied to Archie and Lilibet, and many people began asking why the children's names, and especially their royal-style titles, were being used so openly in connection with lifestyle products. That question only got louder as reports described growing disapproval across Australia, where the visit had already left many with a negative impression. Then came another familiar moment. As soon as Meghan was back, the product push appeared to begin again, helped along by coverage and major celebrity media. Critics seized on that immediately. In the product descriptions and official promotional language, Archie and Lilibet were identified using their full royal titles. To some commentators, that made the intent look even clearer. They argued Meghan no longer sees Harry as the central figure in any of this, but more as a supporting character in a much larger effort built around her own brand. From that perspective, the whole tour began to look less like a humanitarian or public-facing trip, and more like a setup for the next launch. Some commentators even joked that if those names might not be available forever, then this was the moment to make the most of them. Cynical, yes, but that was exactly the tone many critics took. The atmosphere of the visit itself also became part of the argument. Detractors described it as tense, awkward, and overly managed. Those impressions fed into a broader debate about the couple's image, and once the new products entered the spotlight, the criticism only intensified. After the trip, Meghan's social media activity added more fuel, especially because it seemed to connect the children even more directly to her public-facing identity and business efforts. One product that generated a lot of discussion was a candle tied to Lilibet's birthday, listed as June 4 and described with the title Princess Lilibet of Sussex. It was presented as a bright floral fragrance meant to bring openness and light into a home. Another candle was linked to Archie and described as a warm, comforting scent inspired by his birthday, featuring notes like ginger, neroli, and cashmere, with a light reference to his red hair. That level of personalization made the launch feel even more deliberate to critics, who said this was exactly the day they had long expected. The day Meghan would begin openly commercializing her children. The timing made it worse for many people. Commentators pointed out that the launch seemed to land uncomfortably close to a moment associated with Queen Elizabeth II legacy, which made the entire rollout feel even more provocative. At the same time, photos and posts from Australia were criticized as overly polished and image-driven, with some saying they felt more focused on optics than on any real purpose. Another recurring theme was how Meghan appeared to dominate the narrative, while Harry faded into the background. By the time the trip ended, attention had already moved away from the visit itself and on to the next wave of promotions, with major outlets highlighting how Archie and Lilibet were being referenced in official materials. That, in turn, pushed the controversy into a bigger and more uncomfortable space. Some critics were blunt. They argued no one had destroyed the couple's image in Australia, that the damage came from their own actions, their contradictions, and the way they presented themselves. Others went further, claiming the entire model was built on paycheck status and constant reliance on the royal connection. There was also renewed attention on the use of Sussex branding online, especially as royal-linked identity remained central to the public rollout. And then the products themselves became the story. 2 candles, both directly connected to the children's birthdays, were marketed with thoughtful descriptions meant to evoke personality, mood, and family sentiment. Bundles and collaborations reportedly expanded the concept further, keeping those same names and dates at the center of the campaign. To supporters, that may have looked creative or personal, but to critics, it raised a much bigger question. How far should branding go when family, and especially children, are being used so publicly? At the same time, old criticisms resurfaced. A viral clip from a hospital visit during the Australia trip was held up by detractors as evidence of Meghan's behavior, especially one moment where a woman seemed to move toward Harry and Meghan's expression quickly changed. That look has since been replayed over and over by critics, who say it captures something revealing about the tone of the visit. Their argument, repeated again and again, is that Meghan would be in a stronger position if she simply let the titles go and built something solid on her own terms. But in their view, she remains deeply attached to the symbolism of royalty, wanting the world to remember that she is royal, her children are royal, and that all of it still matters. Harry, in that framing, is the one who made those titles possible yet increasingly seems pushed to the side. Meanwhile, the media response has only made things messier. Some outlets cast the launch as thoughtful, personal, and creative. Others see it as coldly strategic. And as the brand appears to be moving more deeply into the lifestyle and fragrance space, the debate keeps growing. What started as criticism of a tour is now turning into a much wider fight over image, family branding, and what exactly the Sussex identity is being used to sell. Part 2, the rollout didn't stop with 2 candles. Reports suggested more fragrances connected to Archie and Lilibet's birthdays could follow, making those family milestones a central thread in the brand's direction. What looked like a small launch now seemed, at least to critics, like the opening move in a much larger home and lifestyle strategy. Meghan herself described the brand as a way to bring beauty and comfort into everyday life, presenting it as personal, warm, and meaningful. But not everyone accepted that framing. One harsh line of criticism focused on the children themselves. Some commentators said Archie and Lilibet were being raised in an environment that already feels performative and unusual, and they questioned what the long-term effect of that could be. Others argued the bigger issue was not simply public exposure, but the way family identity was being mixed with commerce. The title question also. Observers sympathetic to Prince William's position argued he would see this kind of thing as exactly why royal titles and royal links should not be allowed to drift endlessly into private money-making. Their view was simple. If a business is good, it should succeed because the ideas are good, the products are good, and the work stands on its own. In that version of the argument, Meghan keeps returning to royal connections because she has not built a strong enough brand without them. That criticism became even sharper because of the timing. Launching products tied to her children, while conversations about Queen Elizabeth II memory were still emotionally present, struck many people as poorly judged. And the fact that the products seemed to monetize family relationships only made it more uncomfortable, especially given past statements about how dangerous social media and public exposure can be for children. That contradiction has become one of the biggest themes in the reaction. On one hand, there have been repeated warnings in the past about privacy, intrusion, and the risks of public life for young children. On the other hand, critics now see family identity being used in carefully controlled public ways when it appears useful for branding. Whether fair or unfair, that gap is exactly what many people keep pointing to. The Australia trip is still central to all of this. A short clip from the visit, especially from the hospital stop, continues to circulate online. Viewers have fixated on Meghan's expression during a brief interaction, with many calling it stiff, tense, or visibly irritated. That single moment has taken on an outsized role in the conversation because critics say it reflects the mood of the tour more broadly. Another part of the backlash came from people asking a practical question. Why were Harry and Meghan presenting themselves in a quasi-royal way at all? Some Australian commentators argued that the pair were walking into spaces as if they still held an official role, while at the same time lacking a clear reason for being there. In their view, the trip looked like charity on the surface, but carried an unmistakable undertone of image management and monetization. That is where the phrase, a cosplay royalty, started appearing more often in commentary. The argument was that if Harry and Meghan truly want success in the United States or Hollywood, then they need functioning businesses, real execution, and a clear long-term plan. Instead, critics say they keep falling back on staged appearances, symbolic status, and the suggestion of royal importance, rather than developing something substantial. Australian audiences, according to these voices, are not buying it anymore. After years of interviews, documentaries, public accusations, and repeated claims of mistreatment, many people feel they have seen enough to form a settled opinion. And from that viewpoint, the latest product launch only confirms what they already believed. That royal association has become the core product, even more than the candles themselves. Commentators also question the logic of selling luxury items linked so closely to Archie and Lilibet, especially for a holiday like Mother's Day. Some openly mocked the idea of buying a candle inspired by someone else's child. Others said the product wasn't just misguided, but oddly self-centered, another example of a brand built around personal image more than genuine value. The criticism is not coming from only one corner. Across different audiences and countries, there is a growing sense of frustration with how often titles, status, and royal references are used to carry the message. Observers point out that most successful brands do not need to remind buyers who the founder married or what social rank they once held. They survive because people want the product. There's also a wider shift in how the public is responding to this kind of public performance branding. More people are watching closely now. They compare words against actions. They notice when messaging about privacy sits awkwardly beside highly curated glimpses of children, family, or home life. And when those elements don't line up, the skepticism grows fast. The debate has expanded beyond the products into questions of ethics and consistency. Critics ask whether children this young should be connected to public branding at all, and if so, where the boundary lies. That issue has become more relevant because larger conversations are already happening in media and influencer spaces about how minors are used in public content and what long-term harm that can bring. At the same time, the use of names tied to royal history has created another layer of discomfort. For some people, these names are not just labels, they carry weight, legacy, and institutional meaning. That is why the branding feels especially charged. The concern is not only that the names are being used, but how, when, and in what context they are being presented. The Australia tour also stopped looking as successful as some early reporting suggested. Side-by-side images comparing this visit with earlier royal tours began spreading online, and many viewers pointed to thinner crowds and flatter energy. What happened next raised even more questions because the visual comparisons gave critics a new way to challenge the idea that the trip was warmly received. And that brings the story into a more serious phase. Beyond the clips and the commentary, actual polling data has now entered the conversation, and those numbers suggest the public response may have been far colder than supporters wanted to admit. Part 3 new polling from Australia has given critics something more concrete to point to, and it has changed the tone of the conversation. According to reporting that cited Roy Morgan, one of the country's longest-established independent research firms, the numbers tell a story that is far less flattering than the headlines pushing success. The survey included 1,767 Australians aged 18 and over, which gives it real weight in the current debate. One thing stood out immediately: the trip was widely noticed. More than 82% of adults were aware it had happened, so this was not some obscure or ignored event. People saw it, they knew about it. The issue is what they thought after seeing it. That is where the trouble begins. Ends. Among those familiar with the visit, a striking majority said it did nothing to improve their opinion of Harry and Meghan. Only a small minority came away feeling more positive. On the question of whether the tour helped heal family relationships, the answer was even clearer, with most people saying no. Similar numbers rejected the idea that the trip showed a more favorable side of Meghan, and a large share also said they did not believe the couple had been treated unfairly. Put together, those results suggest a strong, consistent pattern rather than a scattered reaction. That matters because it cuts against the claim that negative coverage alone created the backlash. Supporters may argue that headlines were overly harsh or unfair, but national polling is harder to dismiss as media spin. It reflects a broad slice of the public, not just the loudest voices online. And if the tour was supposed to reset perception, it does not appear to have achieved that. For critics, the numbers confirm what they already sensed from the footage, that the visit generated attention, but not admiration. It may even have made existing doubts harder to shake. If this was intended as a template for future international appearances, then people are now wondering whether the strategy itself needs rethinking. That broader question has been growing for a while. Public audiences are more alert than they used to be. They don't just watch the polished photographs or official statements. They compare them with body language, crowd size, tone, timing, and past messaging. When those pieces do not align, the result is distrust. That appears to be exactly what happened here. Many observers came away feeling the trip was more about image than purpose. The debate over direction goes beyond one tour. Critics say Harry and Meghan still have not settled on a clear model for how they want to be seen. Are they philanthropists, business founders, lifestyle influencers, public advocates? Former royals building something new? The problem, according to many of their detractors, is that the answer keeps shifting depending on the moment. And because the foundation feels unstable, even high-profile appearances struggle to connect in a way that feels genuine. There is also growing concern about how long image alone can carry the project. After years of documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and public statements, many people feel the story has been told again and again. At a certain point, audiences want proof of substance. They want consistency. They want work that can stand apart from grievance, symbolism, or status.